Good morning and welcome back to the Isle of Faces. Welcome to our second episode of 100 Questions for the Winds of Winter. I nearly said Scraps and Scrolls, but I didn't. I'm learning slowly. I am your jolly green giant, your jack of all glades, and I'm speaking to you this time from an absolutely soaking wet England. Last time I said it was sunny and lovely, but I think the false spring might have tricked me. Took Princess Zelda out this morning. We were both drenched within minutes. Add another 90 minutes onto that and it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. Luckily, I'm joined by someone who might have a bit more luck in the weather department. Emily of the Eyrie. How is it over there on the other side of the pond?
Good morning. It is great here. It's sunny, not a cloud in the sky. Wish I could send this weather your way.
As I say that, I can see sun in the horizon. I think it waits for me to take the dog out. I don't think it's rainy all the time, only for me at the moment. Seems to be how it's going, but you'll have to provide the solar energy for this one.
I can do that.
So, welcome back, Emily. Welcome back, everyone else. This is our second episode, like I mentioned. The first one went pretty well as far as I'm concerned. It seems like all our listeners out there have enjoyed it. The numbers have done very, very well. Numbers for other episodes recently have done very well. So the second century is off with a bang. And we did have lots of lovely welcoming messages for Emily as well. Just to update you before we get going into our second episode here, we've got a few things to remind you of. Where to start? We've had actually quite a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
Let's start with the most recent, this past weekend, as of recording. By the time you listen to this, it might be a couple of weekends ago, but we were both invited on to the History of Westeros live stream to talk some Arianne, and obviously, seeing as Emily only just had her first podcast the other day, it was her first live stream, it went well. You were fantastic, Emily.
Thank you. Yeah, just diving right in. I had a blast. It was fun talking with you and Aziz and Ashaya. Love talking about Arianne, and even more exciting to follow that up with your most recent episode about Arianne. So
yeah, lots of Arianne going on at the moment. Obviously, the first is already out. Again, by the time you listen to this, Arianne 2 will probably be around. As explained on that episode, Theon has been rearranged so that we're staying in sync with History of Westeros. So that'll be for later. Arianne right now, switch the snowy north for Desert Dawn instead, so that's quite nice. And yeah, I think it did go really well. It was lovely to be over on History of Westeros. We thank them for inviting us in the first place, and hopefully we'll be back soon. What else? Well, we mentioned last time out that we were going to do some kind of icebreaker things with Emily to welcome you to Other Faces, and the first one is in the book. We did some Sporkle spectacularing. We did the opening sentences for A Storm of Swords, and I don't want to spoil anyone. Again, that'll be out at least on Patreon, probably further in public by the time you listen to this. If you really don't want to be spoiled about the result, just skip ahead a couple of seconds, but I can confirm, Emily, you defeated me with ease. You got right past me. You earned the crown straight off, so you've really made an impression there.
Yeah, I think it was pretty close though, was it not? I mean, I think I had a little bit of luck getting a few Daenerys chapters in there, which are of course a lot easier to identify. The settings are quite different, so excited for everybody to hear that. And yeah, hopefully we'll have more opportunities to do fun things like that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look into doing some live streams and stuff like that. I mean, there's no shortage of Sporkle questions just for A Song of Ice and Fire, so we can definitely get that going. But yeah, you did get a few Dannys, but let's not take away from your achievement. I think, this sounds cocky, but I think you're the first person to beat me. I might be wrong. Maybe I've just blanked out other people beating me before, but all in good fun anyway. Like you say, a good way to get you involved and get you relaxed on the Isle.
I had to show everyone I was credible to be here, you know.
Well, you passed with flying colours, obviously. People who haven't listened to that, go and give it a go. Go and have a go with the quiz. That'll be in the show notes, and I'm going to tweet out the link and everything like that. So let us know how you did as well.
Yeah, and another exciting thing coming up soon, we're going to do a Patreon exclusive episode. We've been kind of getting prepared for this. This will be an interview with me hosted by you. So, you know, if you haven't gotten to know me enough through my quiz answers or my opinions here on the 100 questions, we'll definitely deep dive into me, how I got into the series, other nerdy things that I'm into. If you have questions for that, send them to us. I'm sure that we can work some of those in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had to wear my interviewer hat for quite a while, but hopefully I can dust it off, and that'll be another way to break that ice and get you involved. So we're looking forward to that. But like you say, that will be for patrons only, that one. We're going to keep that exclusive. And since we're talking about patrons, Emily, would you like the honour again to list our Jade branches here?
I would love to. So, welcome to our newest Jade Branch patron, the Gardener Queen. And of course, welcome back to all of our regular patrons. We've got Lomas Night Rider, survivor of the Yeen Sleepover, Grizzly Meadows, Glenn T, Aegon the Sixth, Lord Commander Namian Darklin, Kate M, and of course, Archmaester June, healer of the Lesser Poxes.
Yes, thank you one and all. It's great to have you aboard as always. And you might remember last time when we were doing these question episodes, I mentioned that fellow patron Brandy T had some ill health. We were wishing her a speedy recovery, and happy to say that I've heard from Brandy T, and she is indeed on the mend. She had some successful, fairly major surgery, and actually she told me that last time when she heard that shout out, that really helped before going in for her surgery. So let's hope that this second shout out aids in the recovery. Well done, Brandy T. We're thinking of you again.
Absolutely. We hope you get well soon.
So then, let's get down to business, I think. Let's crack on. We do still have 90 questions to cover. Emily, do you want to just give us the briefest of reminders, just in case anyone's forgotten what we're doing here? I'm sure everyone knows, but just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, this is the 100 questions. We're covering anything and everything, the Winds of Winter, anything and everything that you send our way. If you've already caught episode 100, where we debuted the 100 questions, you'll know that we're averaging about 10 per episode, so that's our goal for today as well. Some questions are deep dives, some are broader, some, dive right into theories or specific storylines, while others are a more general take or just opinions on what we're looking forward to. And just as a reminder, we would love as many of these questions as possible to come from you listeners. You've been doing great so far with your suggestions. While our list is nearing 100, we do have to prune some down. There are some repetitive questions or things like that we'll probably lump together and make sure that everybody gets their feedback in. But what I'm getting at here is please keep them coming. If you can think of any questions, if you'd like a shout out on the show, you can email us at isleoffacespodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at either Sir Buckley, or I'm on Twitter now as well at Emily of the Eyrie. And you can also send us a message on our Patreon. Heck, send us a raven if you've got one.
Yeah, not just your questions either, but let us know your answers. You might have completely different opinions to the ones we give, or you might have something we've not thought of. If any of those completely stick out to us, then maybe we can include a few at the beginning of next episode and on and on. So get those involved as well. Other than that, I think we're pretty much ready. I think we've got everything covered. Scraps and Scrolls is rolling along. We've got, obviously these ones will be fairly regular. I don't think we've been too long since the last one. I think everyone remembers. Scraps and Screens, that's still coming as well. Keep your eye on that, and some extra patron stuff. Yeah, I think we've rounded it all off. So let's get going then. Let's get going with our 10. We're going from 11 to 20 today. Emily, would you like the honour of starting us off with our first question?
I would love that. Our first question today, technically question 11 overall. What locations we've never been to before are you all looking forward to seeing in Winds of Winter? This is from James, one of our friends over at the Radio Westeros Discord.
Yes, a strong opener here. Thank you, James. He is one of our besties over there at Radio Westeros. So thank you for sending that in. I always like talking geography and locations of Westeros. But my answer is probably expected, or it's unsurprising maybe to long-time listeners or even readers, which might give you a bit of a hint. I don't want to flog a dead horse, but I think I might have to. I did try to think of a horsey pun from A Song of Ice and Fire, but I couldn't actually remember any horses that die. Then I did. I remembered Smiler, of course. So I don't want to keep flogging Smiler or any other dead horse that you can think of. But my answer is, give me Storm's End. Give it to me right now. I demand it. Long-time listeners will have heard me make the case for Storm's End all the way back in Clash, and probably again in Dance, and most especially in the Big Old Castles book that I wrote a long time ago. But funnily enough, it's come up again.
By the way.
Oh, no, thank you very much. I can't talk about it, get embarrassed too quickly. I'm going to skip work, keep ahead. I'm going to keep reading my notes. Funnily enough, it's come up again recently because I have been writing the notes for Arianne 2, in which she returns us to the Stormlands, so I get to put on my stormy hat and do a little rant about how neglected this area of the world has been, despite being fairly central, continent-wise, and very, very central to the plot earlier on with the War of the Five Kings, and also important historically. And obviously, at the centre of all that is Storm's End, one of the coolest castles you can find, definitely one of my favourites. There is a reason it is the first chapter of that Big Old Castles book that Emily is kind enough to give give me a compliment about there. So if you have happened to come across that, then you'll know it's right there, right at the beginning, that I really like that castle. And
I can't say I was surprised that this was your answer, and I also feel like I can kind of understand why Stannis was so upset about not getting Storm's End the more that I read about it. So not to interrupt, but tell us more.
No, I agree. I'd be pissed if I was Stannis. I would definitely want Storm's End. I won't repeat the full rant for everybody here because it is in the book, and I already do a kind of reduced version in Arianne 2, so you can keep your ears open for that later. But Storm's End deserves some limelight. And I know I am cheating slightly from James's question because, yes, we have seen Storm's End. We've even technically been within its walls or its borders with Davos and Melisandre, but we've never actually been inside it, which just continually blows my mind. It's not made a big enough deal about. We've never been inside one of the most important castles in the realm, and I want to see it. I want to stand atop walls that are 80 feet thick. 80 feet. I want to be in the drum tower. I want to see Storm's End's weirwood tree, perhaps one of the very first to ever be captured in something resembling a godwood. I want to see the chambers where King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne said goodbye to their mother. Show me the round hall that witnessed the face-off between Lucerys Velaryon and Aemon Targaryen. Show me things I don't even know about yet. Can we see Stannis' childhood bedroom? Is that still there? Is there a shrine to Proudwing? I must know. I have a couple more, but I'm going to let Emily have a chance to speak finally while I calm down a little bit from my Storm's End rant.
This is a great question to start off with because we're really leaning on your area of expertise here, and feel free to interject on any of mine because I guarantee you're much more well researched on any castle in Westeros. But I don't actually necessarily expect to see this, but I had to say something about it because I would love to see Greywater Watch so much. The House of the Reeds.
Oh, that is a nice one. Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah, I think we talked last time about Mira and, is she around? What's going to happen with her? And I certainly would love for her to have some kind of, remotely happy ending, get back to see her father. Maybe we actually get to meet Howland Reed, I'm not actually sure of the origins of this, but I did see a hilarious meme recently seeing it referred to as Howland's Moving Castle, a play on the Miyazaki film with a similar name. And I just love that. I thought that was so funny. So, if people can find it, I would love to see Greywater Watch.
She does get to go back there in the show, I guess. She gets a happy ending in the show. So maybe she does in the books. That I love that comparison. Yeah, definitely. And just as a quick bonus question aside, because I do love Howl's Moving Castle. Do you have a favourite? That is Studio Ghibli, isn't it? Howl's Moving Castle. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So is that your favourite or is there another one?
I would say it's one of my top two. I also love Spirited Away. But it's hard to pick because almost all of them are amazing. I think we could do a whole episode on Studio
we certainly could.
Films.
We certainly could.
What about you?
Yeah, I probably have two as well. Probably I've not seen it for a long time. But Porco Rosso is amazing and funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Princess Mononoke. I don't know how other people pronounce it. I don't think I've ever said it out loud before, but it might be my favourite film of all time, to be honest. At least non-comedy film. I like a lot of comedies, but that one means a lot to me. That is an amazing film. But you're right, we could get very distracted.
It's so different than the rest, and I think it probably is in a lot of ways the most similar thematically to A Song of Ice and Fire, just in terms of the setting and the epic nature of it. Not all the films are that way.
It is.
That's my husband's favorite, so you guys, I'm sure, would get along.
Good choice.
All right, back to Westeros.
I guess we'll have to go back.
I'd love to be there. We've been told that we'll see Casterly Rock, and I'm really excited about that, but I'm actually more excited to see about what context we see it in, what POV will go there, under what circumstances. Will it be Cersei returning kind of ousted from King's Landing? Will it be Tyrion triumphantly, becoming Lord of the Rock? Will it be something much bloodier? We don't know. You want to share a little bit about just maybe some fun facts?
Well, there's certainly parts of Casterly Rock I'd be interested to see. I think we did talk about it a little bit last time, didn't we, about what might happen there or how we might wind up there and who and all those kind of things.
I think, I've got one more answer for this. I think if we do see a flashback or a vision through Bran, I'd love to see the Tower of Joy It's a moment in the show that I mostly enjoyed, not speaking about Jon's name at all, but everything else about it I really liked to see. Fun to see, Ned confront Arthur Dayne and the Knights of the Kingsguard. Emotional, heartbreaking, amazing to see Ned and Lyanna together. I'd love to see that and to read about it. So.
Yeah, Bran, he's almost like our cheat code for this question. We could see loads of places that we won't actually get to visit, we won't actually get to be present in, but we could see them, especially if he has like a little montage like he does in Dance of Winterfell, where he's kind of like zooming through all the weirwoods.
Yeah. He
can, as his powers kind of extend in range. And maybe we see some places that like he's not going to recognise them all. So we'll probably have a lot of fun poring over the clues and saying, oh, this is this place, and no, it's that place, and that kind of thing. That'll be quite fun.
Yeah, it'll almost be like interpreting like a prophecy, but in a slightly different manner than some of the prophecies we've had before.
And like you say, places that aren't around anymore, like the Tower of Joy, that would really be our only access point. So ones like that, or like Summerhall or something like that could be really cool.
You read my mind. I was going to say Summerhall.
Other than that, some other candidates for me. Well, firstly, one I don't really want to see, oddly enough, would be the Isle of Faces. I quite like it being a mystery. And besides, we're here busy recording. I don't want any interruptions. So Bran or otherwise, just keep out for now, please. But I also think if that is to come up, I would guess it'd be more likely in A Dream of Spring than Winds. That just seems more thematically linked to that book than this one, if I really had to bet. Mm-hmm. On top of that, some other ones that would be cool and that we're probably quite likely to see would be like Hardhome, Skagos. I mean, I think we're almost guaranteed to see at least one, if not both of those. On the other side of the map, Starfall, for example. That would be pretty cool as well. We might get to see it. There's a decent chance, I think, we get to see that through Hotar.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's going to be loads, isn't there, really? We're not going to be short Even in the preview chapters, you get far more new places than you would actually think just for those chapters alone. Ariane, for example.
Yeah, I was also thinking, like, will we see other locations on the wall? Like, we've obviously seen the Night Fort. We've spent a lot of time at Castle Black, knowing what we know about what's going on in other places. Might we see other forts in a POV rather than just in a mention?
Yeah, that's a great show, actually, especially now that obviously a lot of them have people in and have the wildlings settled in. So I wonder if I can't even remember which one Tormund's is now, but yeah, we could see several of those, I think. That'd be very cool. Okay, right then, on to our second question of the day. Question 12 overall. This one is from yours truly. Who will be the next Nimble Dick? And what I mean by that is who's going to be the fan favourite? For anyone who pays attention to the tournament ran by Davos Fingers, A Song of Madness, you'll know the Nimble Dick fever that seizes everyone at that time of year. So maybe not particularly like old Nimble Dick in character or in personality, but just in how people seem to really enjoy that character or rush to him. Emily, do you have any options?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's anyone out there like Nimble Dick. So yeah, no, I agree with your interpretation of this. Only one. Some options for me. My first one that came about, I think Orain Waters. I think we might have even touched on him really briefly in our last episode in a different context. But honestly, just the way that he basically used, some cunning, but also definitely his appearance to swindle the Royal Navy away from Cersei, like without really like any difficulty, because she was ready to give it up. That just had me cracking up. Every time I think about it, I just laugh. It's one of Cersei's most hilarious blunders. We hear about him in Ariane 1 referenced, Lord of the Waters. So he's still out there. He's, making moves. He's part of this whole just conundrum of what's going on at sea. Lots of ships, lots of confusion. We've got people from Lyce, from Volantis, from the Golden Company. We've got the Red Wine Fleet. We've got Greyjoys. And then, of course, there's the Lord of the Waters. So I'm just thrilled that he's still included, and I can't wait to see what happens with him.
So I think this might be the first question that I remember that we're like diametrically opposed on, because I'm the opposite of a fan of Orain Waters. I can't stand the guy. I think we mentioned this on History of Westeros, but firstly, he sucks at picking his own nickname. The Lord of the Waters, not a fan of that. Of all the nicknames you could get. But I also just found him, while he is, his scenes, like you say, highly amusing and brilliant, because Cersei all but gives him the keys, basically. But I also just found him in himself an annoying arrogant pup that could definitely use a slap. But then this is a fan award, not a Joe award, so it's plenty possible I do see where you're coming from. I definitely agree with you.
Don't mistake me either. I don't think he's a good person at all. And I agree that the nickname needs some work. At least go with long waters, or, add a little something to it. But yeah, I'm fascinated with what happens next. I hope it's not just a fizzling out,
No, I agree with you. I think he is coming back. I mean, he has, I think we mentioned this with Aziz, but he has a big fleet, the best fleet on those waters. Other pirates, they're not going to be able to contend with him. Someone's going to either want those ships or want his allegiance. Could very well be Daenerys when she finally comes across. It could be someone else. So he's far from done. So I think you'll definitely get the opportunity to see him.
Yeah, absolutely. My second pick for this, maybe Pate. This is kind of a weird one, so I'll explain where I'm going with this. We obviously know the true Pate met his downfall in his prologue chapter, but he shows up again in Sam's final chapter in Feast. He's likely or almost certainly being inhabited by a faceless man, probably Jaqen H'ghar. Who knows? We know there are many of those agents out there in the world. I don't think we'd recognize Jaqen anyway with the way that he changes his faces. So to me, just this whole concept that it's not the real Pate, it's just highly intriguing. If he's doing a good job of kind of keeping up appearances as this unremarkable Pate thrust together with Sam, Alleras, Leo, Tyrell, I just think it's going to be entertaining to watch. Where I think as readers, I'll probably be giggling along with that. I hope.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting idea to me, because I've always figured that the Pate that we were introduced to is just gone, he's dead, and it is Jaqen / the alchemist or whoever just took his face or something. But either way is perfectly possible. And I suppose even if that's true, then that faceless man, whoever he is, if he knows Pate well enough, if he's been studying him, then he could still represent that same character, that same personality, because he obviously wants to use his role, like you say, like we saw at the end of Feast. So I guess it comes down to a question of what counts as character. If he's representing the Pate that we knew, then it's still kind of the same character, isn't it, if you get me? But that's definitely very interesting. I think that might come up in a later question as well, this whole storyline of Pate and what's going down at the Citadel.
I kind of expect that we'll see, as much as possible, acting or, and trying to interpret or react to things around our POV character, Sam, as Pate, because people who knew the real Pate should be around as well, like Leo, Alleras, etc. But I think that George is clever, and we're probably going to see little glimmers of the real Pate probably wouldn't have said that or wouldn't have done that, or this person seems a little bit more perceptive or sneaky, or I'm just excited for these little clues or little bits we'll see here and there. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to see if people can poke holes in the disguise, I guess, and how much time they have before everything really kicks off in Old Town, and whether that really gets explored. That's
a great point. You've heard a couple of my fan favorites now, or at least this fan. But what about you?
I think it is going to have to be Elia Sand for me. Again, I won't go on too much because I brought this up on History of Westeros as well. But she's appearing in Scraps and Scrolls at the moment in the Arianne chapters. And I just think she's great. She's cool. She's witty. She wants to go and make her mark on the world. And I'm falling ever more in love with the idea that we'll see her actually get to do some jousting in a celebratory Aegon tournament in King's Landing. I love the juxtaposition of her name being Elia, but her nature being Lyanna, two women who are obviously very, very connected thematically, but never actually interacted. So she's my pick, definitely. She's my favourite out of the new characters we've got so far in the preview chapters, and I think she's going to take everyone else by storm as well. But like I say, that's just me, and Emily, your choice is yours. But this is a fan award, so this is definitely one that everyone can let us know their picks for. I think we've got a few of these today, actually, that would be quite easy for people to send their answers. We'd love to hear from everyone who you think is going to be your new fan favourite, or someone jumping ahead in your rankings, maybe.
Yes, please tweet at us. I want to know. It's always hard to pick a fan favorite when you're only one fan. So, all right, ready for the next question?
Yes, please.
All right. This question comes to us from actually a few of my friends here where I live in Michigan, chatting about the last episode, and this came up. So
cool.
This question is, what storyline or character do you find most difficult to predict and wins, either immediately or over the whole course of the book?
Well, actually, yeah, this is what I was just referencing. I hadn't written this down, but now that you bring it up and now that we're talking through it, the Pate angle or the alchemist angle of the Citadel, I've got no idea what's going on there. Just to add in, this isn't even my actual answer, but now I'm thinking about it, I've got ideas what Euron could do or what Sam might end up doing, but that specific part of it, what the alchemist is up to and what he's looking for, I've really got zero idea. I don't know if you've got any ideas, just to put you on the spot, Emily, but that is one I'm very, very confused about.
Yeah, I don't know either. That prologue chapter probably took me by surprise more than any of the others. So, except maybe the very first one. And yeah, I'm really curious as well. I think we have some ideas about what's going to happen in Old Town, but in terms of like Pate specifically and what the new Pate's goals actually are, I think that's something that's going to be answered in Winds, but there's not a lot of info for us to start theory crafting on, I don't think.
No, and that's definitely one of the ones we've got the least evidence for, because like you say, we've got it in the prologue and we literally have it in like the last sentence of Feast, and that's going on like 16 years ago, and we've got nothing, there's nothing else to even connect it to, really. So that's just one we're really just gonna have to wait and see for.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say that was your unofficial answer. What's your official answer? Unofficial.
That was me going off on a tangent. Well, in terms of what happens immediately, like right at the beginning, I would have to go with whatever's happening with Jaime, Brienne and Stoneheart, plus like the Brotherhood in general, that whole area, Riverlands type plot line. Everyone out there listening will know I'm not really one for theorizing or predicting overall. It's just not my thing, but it does obviously come up quite a lot. I know it is a big thing for everyone else, and that's brilliant because there's lots of people out there who are really, really good at it. Personally, I never like to look too closely, but doing these kind of questions and even scraps and scrolls, I have to sometimes. And I have even my own ideas, or I've seen different ideas for what will happen later on in the book with these cast of characters. But before that, there just seems to be like this little blob, this block at the beginning that remains unclear to me. I can never quite see through about what happens immediately when Brienne brings Jaime back to Stoneheart. I think we know the general framework it will take. There's going to be something resembling a trial, or there'll definitely be talk of oaths, because we know that's what kind of binds Jaime and Catelyn together, and also Brienne's there with Oathkeeper, so that's all thematically fitting. Maybe there's some more swearing of oaths involved. Maybe there's even a forced duel if Stoneheart really wants to be cruel. They're all good possibilities, but there's nothing that reaches out and grabs me of precisely what the initial Brienne or Jaime chapters will involve. And I must say, while I just mentioned that I can foresee later storylines for the group after getting through this block, I do actually struggle, I must admit, with placing Brienne. I'm not really sure what her Winds arc is going to be about. I think we all assume it's going to either point her to go along with Jaime or point her to go along with Stoneheart, but I'm just not convinced of either, and I can't really pick. I think actually maybe out of all of our POVs, I've got the least sense of direction for Brienne right here at the beginning, which is fitting for Brienne because she spent a lot of Feast kind of wandering about, not knowing where to go, so maybe that can continue. But yeah, I really don't have any idea what she's going to be up to for the bulk of the book.
I agree with you, and I think it was recent Winds of Winter primer from Radio Westeros where they broke down several different theories or options for how things could go, but I found myself completely unable to pick a path, or to, it all seemed equally plausible to me. And I think that there are other things outside of that could happen as well. I love Brienne. I love Jaime. They're probably two of my top 5 characters. So, I've got this mental block on the idea that either of them could die, but, they're in a pretty dangerous situation and we can't rule that out either. So, great pick here.
What about yours?
Yeah, my pick, for me, it would have to be Cersei and just King's Landing in general. It's been one of the biggest locations in the series for a long time. We've had so many POVs in and out of King's Landing. I'm just going to start by breaking down kind of where we left things and how many variables go into what could possibly be going on in King's Landing and with Cersei, because I think this is why this is my answer. So Cersei has recently completed her walk of shame and has been presented with her new white cloak, Sir Robert Strong. There are trials upcoming for Cersei and Marjorie. We've got much of the Tyrell strength kind of scattered or weakened from where it was around, both of the weddings, I suppose. We don't know the fate of Loras. Cersei herself doesn't have very many allies either, so the fact that the Tyrells are a bit more spread out isn't a huge boon to her, given everything that's happened to her lately. In the dance epilogue, we know Pycelle and Kevin Lannister have been murdered. Varys is back in play, clearly not a friend to Cersei. Jaime did not return. to her like she had hoped. Her letter, very emotional, didn't seem to have the impact that she wanted. And of course, let's not forget a literal child sits on the Iron Throne. So that's just King's Landing. Like, let's talk about everything else too. We've got Aegon in the south. We've got Dorne still holding Myrcella, pretending to play nice while planning to back one or the other dragon, certainly not Cersei. The situation at the Wall, terrible. Stannis and the Boltons, occupied for now, but, that's going to, I think, resolve itself in wins. We've got Dany, still tied up in her Myrni's knot, but the dragon rumors are spreading. That's going to have an impact on things in Westeros, even if she doesn't show up right away. And then let's not forget Peter fucking Baelish in the Vale, scheming away with Sansa. So this is the reason I choose Cersei, because like so many things that I just listed here, the outcome of that is going to impact her storyline. She's really at the center of it. She holds King's Landing for now, we think, but that grip is very tenuous. She has very few allies. It's almost a matter of which shoe drops first, what will happen to her, I think.
That was a great pick. Yeah, it's really strong. I have to agree with you. I remember doing that dance epilogue for I don't know how many hours in the last episode for the dance, Scraps and Scrolls. And I mean, like I say, it was hours and hours. And I know I barely touched the surface of the different things going on in King's Landing. Like, I didn't even touch the trials and what could happen there. There's obviously things to happen before. I think this is actually fairly similar in why I can't see Brienne, Jaime Stoneheart. I think it's the same thing. There's a block at the beginning. I can think of things after. I can think of what's going to happen when Aegon assumedly comes along and stuff like that. But before that, the initial is really hard for me to see. I can't really think of what's going to happen with the trial with her or Marjorie. I could guess about something with Gregor/Robert Strong going all out and replicating something from the show in terms of violence. But as for the details, no, my ideas don't become clearer until Aegon and the others start showing up. And don't forget the Sand Snakes are coming, and we've still got the High Sparrow and all those things. I mean, as you touched on, there's a million things going on. Varys, I know what Varys is going to do. Overall, he's going to get Aegon there, but what's he going to do beforehand to continue messing up Cersei and the Tyrells? And what is the reaction to both Kevin and Pycelle's murder? Who accuses who makes those accusations stick, and all those kind of things? Yeah, I really can't begin to guess. So that's a great pick from yourself.
Yeah, and I think actually our two answers clearly knit together a little bit because we're talking about Jaime and Cersei, and they are clearly about as intertwined as you can be. I expect their stories to intersect again at some point, but they both have really dangerous situations to survive before that can happen. And so how that all shakes out, I hope we find out soon.
Yeah, definitely a nice connection between the two answers there. I'm not personally sure they'll meet again in King's Landing. I know this is touching on our other earlier question, but I could see them reuniting maybe at Casterly Rock. Maybe it is King's Landing, but nothing's pointing me that direction there quite yet.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Indeed.
Great question. And I think our next question comes from one of our patrons. You want to kick that one off?
Yeah, indeed. This is from Grizzly Meadows, to give the full patron name. So thank you, Grizzly, for sending this one in. We kept it for our second episode. You actually wrote in a really long message, which was a pleasure to read. I've cut it down just a little bit here so we have the question to focus on. What it comes down to is, what was Tywin Lannister doing in Lys? And Grizzly says, was it something to do with the pleasure houses and Tywin's own sexual hang-ups? Is it related to the Ty prefix that Tyrion and Grizzly thought about during dance, about Lannisters maybe being in Essos and long-lost Lannisters and that kind of thing? It's a big question. Emily, do you want to try and tackle it first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Grizzly, for making me put a lot more thought into Tywin Lannister's sex life than I ever have before. No, I kid. I do like this question a lot. I had to put some thought into it. There's a lot going on. Like you said, you trimmed it down. I think, there were some great points and thoughts made in it. There's clearly some evidence that Tywin has some, weird sexual hangups dating back to his father's mistress. I certainly would not consider Tywin to be a sex-positive character. I don't think that the term sex-positive exists in Westeros to begin with, although I think there are a few characters who lean that way. But taking a journey to Lys just for the pleasure houses seems a bit out of character, and I think that the evidence that we have suggests otherwise. Not to say that that's not part of what he was doing there, but I think, taking a trip specifically for that purpose is a bit out of character for someone as like image obsessed and, intent on his own control of things as Tywin. Nevertheless, according to the Mercy chapter, he definitely did go there. So would you like to remind us of that quote?
Yeah, sure. There's actually talk about what Grizzly's referring to here, the evidence here. So it says, "Down in Lys and Mur and old Volantis," the other guard replied. "He was an older man, big-bellied and grizzled. I went to Lys with Lord Tywin once, when he was hand to heiress."
Yeah, so we know this older guard visited Lys back during the Tywin's handship. So we have a rough dating on it due to that. And by the way, I just want to give a little shout out to History of Westeros. They just put out an amazing audio play of the Mercy Sable chapter. This quote here was delivered by Yolkboy, who plays the old guard. So if you're not a patron of theirs or if you aren't following them, you need to listen. It's so wonderful.
I encourage everyone to not listen now. I don't want me being compared to Yolkboy. I will come up short in that comparison.
Go ahead and, don't pause us, finish this episode, but, for a little dessert later, definitely go check that out.
Yeah, definitely do.
Yeah, so as I said, we don't really know the exact timeline, but I think whether the trip happened before or after Joanna's death will make all the difference in terms of, how much the pleasure houses came into play. It's very clear that Tywin loved Joanna. There are so many remarks made to confirm this. All the smiles dying with her death. I think, the purpose of the trip was probably truly official business, either hiring sellsword companies for a coming conflict, maybe doing some cleanup after the War of the Ninepenny Kings. He certainly could have been seeking a lost Valyrian blade, which I will not touch on too much right now because we have another question about that coming up later. He could have been hunting down rumors of remaining Blackfires even. There's so many reasons he could have gone. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is where I would most likely land, to be honest. Just off the top of my head, when I first read this question, before even really trying to look into it, I figured it would either be trying to find a bride for Rhaegar, as Steffon Baratheon was, maybe later on, maybe at the same time. Again, the timeline's a bit confused. He was sent to do that, so maybe Tywin was the same. Or it was maybe a smoothing out of trade issues or relations following the war. Probably the trade part, to be honest. I think that is quite an important thing to make sure you've got down. I hadn't thought about the Blackfires part, so that's a really good point. I don't know how much of that was a thing that Aerys dedicated a lot of thought to. Was he particularly bothered about that? Was he worried about that? Some of that comes into the timing of the writing, that we know George didn't really come up with the Blackfire stuff until a bit later, when he'd already established Aerys quite a lot, so they don't quite mix with the backstory, but that doesn't mean we can't find out about it later. Or maybe he didn't think about that because Tywin was doing the thinking for him. Maybe Tywin was worried about that kind of thing coming up again later. Maybe this was a trip where he was kind of nipping that in the bud, but I'm not too sure. You have some more thoughts on it though, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually want to kind of jump off of something you said here regarding the Blackfires, which it would be such an interesting parallel if, that was part of the reason. We've got, Aerys paranoid about Blackfires, and then, one kind of leader later, we've got Robert paranoid about Daenerys and Viserys, so,
that's true.
There's always this kind of other threat from Essos. I kind of like the idea of that. Whether or not it's true, we don't know. As you said, there's a lot of out of world reasons why that might not come up. Although, given that this came up for us in Winds, I think that certainly Blackfires are potentially in play. So
yeah, true.
Maybe we'll find out. Maybe this is just a little mystery we'll never know the answer to. But to get to kind of some of the other points that Grizzly Meadows made, we know there's a lot of history throughout the books of Lannisters visiting Essos. That's actually where they lost their Valyrian sword way, way back in the Forging of the Seven Kingdoms. Unfortunately, the king, the Lannister king bearing it, and his Golden Fleet were lost after a final stop in Volantis. They reference the Golden Fleet coming to Volantis, leaving, never being seen again. People actually went out and looked for them and nothing came up. So that's just one of the many Lannister trips east over the centuries. Obviously much more recently, we've got Tywin's brother disappearing over there as well. So, we have to remember that in addition to the Lannister love or fondness for using Ty as a prefix in their names, there's an entire city over there named Tyrosh. And so that equally could have been contributing to the popularity of Ty names. So just a counterpoint there.
Yeah, I definitely like the Tyrosh point, because I know people do go with the Ty thing quite a lot. I had to do it a little bit because Tyrion focuses on it a lot in Dance. It does seem like one of those things where why is George bringing this up unless we're supposed to be taking notice of it? So I understand why people do fixate on that, but I do think, like you say, Tyrosh is kind of an example there.
That could just be some of Tyrion's drunken narcissism too, of Tyrion, Ty, that obviously relates back to me.
Very much so. I think that is a Lannister thing in general, that everything must relate to. I mean, look at Cersei. Nothing happens without it being related to her in some way. So yeah, that's dead on. For this answer overall, I did have to really look into it because, to be honest, I'd completely forgot that this was a thing, that we knew this. I know it had come up as a topic of discussion recently in some parts of the fandom, but it's nothing I've ever really dedicated a lot of thought to. In fairness, we haven't covered the Mercy chapter in Scraps and Scrolls, and this is where we get the evidence from, so I've not had to think about it yet. But sometimes there are things I think can be picked at too much that don't hold as much importance or as many secrets as fans might like. And I'm not saying this is one, but it definitely could be, I think. I do like the idea that he would like to look for Bright Raw / Geryon, but I just can't convince myself that Tywin Lannister, of all people, remember, he mocked that trip for Geryon, and when Tyrion suggested he wanted to go as well, he didn't think it was a worthy thing. I just can't believe that he would ever take a trip for either of those purposes solely. Firstly, there's nothing we know of to suggest that Lisa would be a good starting place anyway, but it also just doesn't match with his personality. Would he have a quick look around if he happened to be there on actual official business just in case? Yeah, sure, but I don't think that would be the reason for him to go. So I land back on the bride thing. I think it's the same with the sex worker question. Like, if Tywin really wanted to interact with some sex workers, he could still do that in King's Landing. Like, we know he does later on for a start, but even at that point, he could still very well do that. Now, depending on the timeline and who he wants to keep that secret to, okay, yes, you could argue maybe he does want to go all the way across the narrow sea for that kind of thing, but it wouldn't be the sole purpose. So I come back to the bride thing, like I say, which he was probably doing just to keep Aerys happy, because remember, he wanted to marry Cersei to Rhaegar. So maybe he's just going over saying, yeah, I'll go and look. Oh no, I did have a look around. At least there was no one there, unfortunately. Yeah,
it's crazy. I met so many blonde women and none of them are as good as my daughter. So
yeah. Sorry, I did look. I imagine there's theories out there of him delivering Tysha to Lys or something like that, but they don't hold water with me, so I'm going to go with the bride option, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I like that. All right. Well, I think we've given that a lot of weight. I'll move us on to our next question, which I did hint about a little bit here. So this next question comes from Willard the Slumbery, another friend of ours on the Radio Westeros Discord. He asks, will any new Valyrian steel swords be introduced on page? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, this might even be my question of the week. I really like this one. This is another one we could go very deep dive onto.
Oh, yeah.
What we'll do first off is we'll just list the known Valyrian steel swords that we haven't seen but that we expect to be out there somewhere. So obviously, let's kick off with Blackfire. We know that one. That was last known to be with bitter steel over in Essos. Very closely tied with that is Dark Sister, last seen in possession of Bloodraven and likely up above the wall, maybe very, very, very close to Bran right now. A lot of people think that. As we've just mentioned, there is Bright Raw, lost by Tommen Lannister II, like you said, a king, on his way to Valyria.
With Bright Roar, just to reiterate what we said before, that potentially was lost at sea. So this doesn't strike me as one that I think we're going to find. I don't see anyone getting to Valyria and finding it. I don't see anyone inventing scuba diving and finding it, but it's certainly worth a mention.
Well, if Melisandre can find Davos's finger bones, if she did, then maybe someone can find Bright Roar. But you're right, might be at the bottom of the ocean, might be in Volcano, Valyria, could be anywhere. Or maybe someone has it on their shelf. But for some lesser known ones, we've also got Vigilance, which is the sword of House Hightower. Now this one was last seen all the way back in the Dance of the Dragons, and it was wielded by Ormond Hightower before he was slain by Roddy the Ruin in the Battle of Tumbleton, and no one's seen it since. So maybe it was just lost there, but maybe not. Maybe it's recovered. We haven't met enough Hightowers to really know yet. In the same way, there is Lamentation of House Royce, also lost during the Dance of the Dragons, this time during the storming of the Dragon Pit. Now that one, because that was like a riot type thing, that's much more likely to be completely lost than the others, but again, who knows. I think we can kind of exempt Blackfire and Dark Sister from this answer because they might be pretty likely to show up. But I think that'd be a pretty popular answer. People have got lots of theories about those two.
If anything, I was more surprised that Blackfire hasn't shown up already. Like when Aegon kind of outs himself, that would have been a great moment. But, perhaps that's being held off on purpose to be something that, should be done in Westeros to kind of lend him legitimacy. I don't know. A lot could be happening with Blackfire.
I definitely think we see that very, very soon. So I'll go with those lesser two then, Vigilance and Lamentation. I'd like to see them both, actually, because we're definitely going to meet more of House Hightower, and we're going to uncover a lot of their mysteries and wins, likely through Sam. We already got a little tidbit of it there at the end of Feast, but I think we're going to get more of that. So I'd like him to meet various members. There's quite a few of them, actually, but I would definitely like him to meet Lord Leighton Hightower, who's been there at the top of the tower for ages doing who knows what. Lots of mysteries there. That would be very, very cool. And, well, the Vigilance, the name, is the stronger thematic link, because the Hightowers, historically, they've always kept a vigil over Old Town, which was the original cradle of Westerosi society for centuries. But more specifically, like I said, Leighton Hightower, he's been waiting. Maybe he's been protecting something, we don't really know. So I like the idea that he's been keeping Vigilance, the sword, up there at the top of the tower for all this time until it's really needed. Maybe Sam gets his hands on it. Maybe someone else gets their hands. Give it to Gilly. I just want Gilly to get more things. So yeah, I'm really hoping for that one. I think that's probably the more likely.
Yeah, I like that answer. Well researched.
And on the other side of things, Lamentation for House Royce. Well, House Royce, we know many more of them. We've already met a lot of them. They're probably going to be quite involved in the Vale plot. And, well, I'd like it if they went on full-on rebellion to stop Peter Baelish. And maybe that includes getting out this sword that no one's seen for ages.
Yeah, maybe. I think I have differing opinions on this one than you do. No.
No, that's fine.
You know, I've seen some comments before about how this could be something that Littlefinger uses to kind of further gain a grip or some control over House Royce. You know, we hear so much about the tapestries, and I know there's a theory out there that perhaps Lamentation is rolled up in one of those tapestries and is being brought to the Vale as kind of a bargaining chip. How far that bargaining chip goes, and if that matters, and if that bargaining chip ultimately gets turned against Peter Baelish, we'll find out. But, I think it kind of depends on how it shows up, what will happen with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Peter Baelish is already aware of it, like you say, if he's aware of it first, instead of them, like, unveiling it against him, then, yeah, probably bad news, and he probably will use that as another wedge drive further, because he'll know the value of such, the symbolic nature of such, and he has a history of Valyrian steel himself, so that'll definitely work out. So yeah, that's a good point, well made.
What's your serious pick, though? I know you have one.
Well, I'm gonna cheat a little bit again. I'm gonna name Nightfall, which is currently in possession of Harris Harlaw. Now that does show up in Feast. We meet Harris, he's one of Asher's champions, but she mentions that he's got the sword, but we don't get a look at it. He doesn't get it out or anything like that. So I'm going to count it as one that would basically be new if it really featured in wins. Now I bring it up, Nightfall, because that was House Greyjoy's sword, but they lost it to their relations somehow. They're quite closely connected to the Harlaws. We don't know how it changed hands, but it did. I think House Greyjoy would probably quite like it back, especially Euron with his appreciation of Valyrian steel things. If he's got his armour, he'd probably quite like a sword as well. And Nightfall seems like it would match quite well with him thematically as well. I'm very interested in its naming, Nightfall. Will we see a knight be felled by Nightfall? Is that what it's going to be used for? Or is it something closer to the Winterfell naming? Is it used to fell night, maybe? Or is it something to do with the long night? They're all possible, but definitely I think they would. House Greyjoy would really, really like that back. Again, especially Euron. Because remember, out of the great families, great houses, very, very few of them actually have any Valyrian steel. The Starks did, they don't currently, unless you count Longclaw. The Greyjoys did, they lost theirs. The Lannisters did, they lost theirs. The Targaryens did, and supposedly they lost theirs. So there's not a lot floating around. So it would be a big thing for them to get back.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your point about the naming convention too. I think, there's so much symbolism or so much interesting stuff that could play into later. So I'm excited to see if any of that shakes out. I think you did an awesome job of profiling all of the known Valyrian blades linked to Westeros, but I also want to bring up a point that Tyrion makes. This is a quote from him in A Storm of Swords. Valyrian steel blades were scarce and costly, yet thousands remained in the world, perhaps 200 in the Seven Kingdoms alone. Now, we know, I think the exact number is 227 in Westeros, which suggests that if there are thousands remaining in the world, a lot probably are in Essos or other areas of the known world. we've got several POV characters over that way right now. And so I'm just curious to see if anything that we've never heard of before might show up in a Tyrion chapter, or with Dany, Barristan, Victarion, maybe even Arya before she heads back to Westeros. Though I have to say, Arya is probably my least likely pick for getting a blade, because she's so interlinked with Needle, and I would almost find it odd for her to change weapons.
Definitely.
Granted,
she might see one though.
Yeah, I mean, we saw her take up the Valyrian steel dagger a few times in the show, but, that's the show. We don't, that might not have anything to do with this, so.
No, I agree. I think there'll definitely be a lot we've got no idea of popping up. There's also the, I can't remember the name of where they're going now. It comes up early in the Stannis Davos thing where they're talking about, is it Celtigar? Celtigar? They're talking about that raid that the Florent wants them to go on. And it's mentioned they've got like they've got like a Valyrian steel axe, I think, or there's something in there. So there's lots of different items around as well that might have a sword around. So we're going to see lots of them, I think.
Yeah, so I've got kind of a little bonus question here.
Go on.
I think you probably will have a great answer for it. Is there an ancient or old house that you're surprised we haven't seen linked to a Valyrian steel sword yet? If you're going to pick a house that you'd love to see with one that has had no reference in the text so far, can you think of a hypothetical name for that hypothetical sword?
Well, like I just said, it's surprising who has and who hasn't really. There doesn't really seem to be like that much of a pattern to who has a Valyrian steel sword and who hasn't. Probably because if you come across one, you grab it and you keep hold of it. So it's just kind of a finders keepers thing to a certain degree. But I think there are a lot of houses that probably have had them in the past and we haven't learnt about it, or we're just surprised they don't have them. This is a good question. I like this. This is definitely one that people can email in with. Give us your houses, give us your made up names. I'm sure you're going to do better than I will. I'm thinking House Blackwood. They're an ancient house. They're very, very old. They've got lots of creepy, mystical things in their background, and probably tons of possible names of them because there's so much to do with House Blackwoods. We associate them with trees or ravens or the colour black or even weirwoods. So in terms of names, well, Blackbird, that would be good, but it'd be a bit misdirecting because they're not connected to blackbirds, they're connected to ravens. Red Raven, if you're going to go for the Blood Raven angle, he's linked to the colour red. It works for alliteration, but in general, no. Darkwing, that's another one. Makes me think of the duck, though, unfortunately. But that gets a few votes in my mind. Also, a group of ravens is an unkindness, I believe. That's not a bad name for a sword, is it? Unkindness. I think it is. I might be wrong. There.
Do you have... All right. What's your final pick, though? You're down to the wire. You got to name it right now.
Okay, for all my 10 Blackwood names, I'm going to go the Pokemon angle. I'm going to call it Razorleaf.
Ooh, I like that.
might be rubbish, but in my mind, I'm settling it. What other... House Mallister is another really super old house I could see having one squirreled away for beating back the Ironborn. What would they call theirs? Winged Wave? Put the eagle with what they're looking at. That'd be cool. Yeah. What about you? Have you got any?
I'm not very good at this kind of thing, I'll be honest with you, but I was thinking about an ancient house, House Westerling. So their house words are honor, not honors. I might have mentioned in my introductory episode that I'm a fan of Brandon Sanderson as well. So I just love the idea that there could be an honor blade out there. something
nice,
very commonly referenced in Stormlight Archives. So not a great pick or anything like that, but it did amuse me.
It probably beats out Razorleaf, I would think.
Please, like you said, I really hope that our listeners send us some more theoretical sword names. I would love that.
Yeah, that's definitely one we could make a nice little list out. People put a graphic up on Twitter or something on Patreon. I think all of you out there can do a really good job naming some swords for us. But yeah, definitely do that. Otherwise, we're already halfway through. We're on to question 16 now. I'll take this one because it's another one of mine actually, so it makes sense that I will read it. Emily, who do you think is going to be the most disappointing, or maybe the most likely to get an early exit? Now, you could look at this a few ways. You could look at it on like the national stage, out of the big players, or maybe you want to choose a more specific like micro situation. But I thought of this question based on the structure of earlier books, because we almost always lose a major player early on. Robert Baratheon dies very early on in game, Renly even earlier I think in Clash, and then Robb's halfway through Storm and Balon and Joffrey aren't too far either side of him as well. Everyone thinks that Mance dies early on in Dance, even if we know he really doesn't. So really it's only Feast that's come through, or maybe there is an example for Feast. If there is, I've forgotten one. Is there another that you can think of, or do you have a more specified situation you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. I think this is tough. We've got like so many battles about to kick off that I think we're going to see casualties, and some of those casualties are going to hit us hard, I think. So I know you're going to hate my answer for this one, but thinking of the Battle of Fire, I kind of wonder if we could see Barristan fall here. You know, he's in control now. We've gotten hints from some of the sample chapters that the tide of battle is going to go in his way with some of the turned sellsword companies. But Barristan's still got a lot of Myronese who would happily let him be their champion, fight in the war, win the battle, and then plant a dagger right in his back. You know, they don't really want Westerosi control. There's a huge culture clash between, you know, not just Daenerys and the Myronese, but especially an old knight from Westeros who, you know, can't get the titles right, who can't kind of break the customs of Westeros and adapt. And in general, it's just kind of mucking things up. They don't, you know, he's not wanted there. With Dany gone, I think they'll find it, you know, plenty of opportunities to try to deal with him. Now, I really don't want this to happen. I would love to see him make it well past this. I think we've talked before, and we'll talk again about, you know, how he'll adapt to hearing about Aegon, but you know, he's got to make it out of Meereen before that can come about. So that's one of my answers. I mean, I think, you know, it could equally be Victorian. There's so many POVs over in or around Meereen right now that unless they scatter again, they're not necessarily all needed to be there. True. We'll see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I won't go too far into it, but for anyone who's listened to Scraps and Scrolls, I mean, you're right, completely. We've gone through that quite a lot, the possibilities of Skahaz, possibilities of the pit fighters. Even though it looks quite good for him at the moment, that almost worries you more, I think. If you've been reading George for any amount of time, when he gives good things, that's normally more cause for concern than when he gives bad things, because that's what normally happens. But yeah, I'm with you. I hope it's not Barristan, but it could be.
Yeah. I think so much, like, you know, I mean, a lot of theories I had going into, you know, book 2 or book 3 or book 4, it was like, oh, all the characters that I'm used to are going to survive, and here's what I think they'll do in the next series. And then, you know, nope, that's not what happens. They're dead now, got to reconfigure. And so given the nature of this question, I tried to pick things where it was like, you know, we can see a path for them forward, but, you know, they're in harm's way right now. Will they make it out? You know, another thing that I was thinking about is I'm expecting a death during the tourney of the Vale. Maybe, you know, kind of to harken back or to mimic the death of Sir Hugh in the first book. So I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. You've been digging into to Elaine lately.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that, like the thematic link of a Valeman going down in the tourney. That would, like you say, make a lot of sense considering the death of Sir Hugh. I really like looking back at the Hands tourney in terms of Sansa, so that would really, really strike if she's seeing two very, very similar things. To me, it would be pretty funny if it was Harry that went down straight away, just because it would mess with Littlefinger's plans, and I like that idea.
Oh, yeah.
I would also like the idea of there being a faction that have realised what Peter Baelish is up to, and maybe they're taking steps to stop his moves. Now, I don't think there's many that would want Harry dead, but you never know. Maybe there is. Maybe there's like a rogue faction going on there. So yeah, I have covered, again, I won't go too far into it. That is another Scraps and Scrolls area, but I could definitely see that happening. You expect. I reckon there's probably, I mean, how many deaths does a tourney average? At least one, you would think.
At least
normally.
1 or 2. Yeah. I think, you know, another option, especially if we're going with the mimicking of Sir Hugh, is, you know, who might Littlefinger want to fall because they know too much and he doesn't want people to be able to ask them questions. You know, there's several candidates for that. I good luck to anyone who tries to take down Lynn Corbray. I don't, you know, good luck with that. But, you know, maybe, you know, we know the Mad Mouse is there. And if Littlefinger or Sansa starts getting a bad feeling about him, well, pretty easy to put a bounty on his head or to match him up against someone he can't withstand. So that could be a way. Now, that's not a very disappointing, or, you know, I wouldn't compare that to like Robb or Renly, but certainly something I've been thinking about.
No, that's true. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of the Mighty Mouse there. That would definitely be one we'd quite like to see, probably. That actually makes a lot of sense in my head, because so far we haven't seen any indication that Peter Baelish knows about him or is worried about him, but maybe he does know, and maybe he's just going to use this as a way to get rid of him without casting any suspicion on himself. That definitely sounds like him. As you say, there's probably some way he can get into some house's favour by killing this person off or that person off or wherever it might be. We've seen already countless examples of him doing exactly that, just a little nudge in this direction or that to get a house on side. So having someone die, yeah, that fits very, very well. I definitely think you're on something there. I think the most likely answer based on the examples I gave at the beginning for me they'd probably point to Stannis. Now, we know there's already going to be a rumour about his death, but I don't actually think it would be death this time that would be the most likely for him. I don't even think it would be defeat, not at the beginning. I still expect him to win Winterfell. I think most people do. I think it's the aftermath that might not go his way. I can still see Rickon suddenly appearing, or maybe even Sansa by that point, when timing's difficult, but maybe. Either way, I think what it will come down to is Stannis winning Winterfell for the North, defeating the Boltons, and doing what he should be doing, his plan going through, but then ultimately the North still shunning him, turning their backs, forcing him back up to the wall, back into desperation. It looked like he's out of the running for the Iron Throne, at least initially. I think that really fits in with Stannis as a person who never gets his due in his mind. He never gets his thanks, and no one ever likes and stuff like that. So I think that would fit really well with him if we're going to go by like those earlier kingly examples.
I really like that, and I think that depending on who it is, what Stark it is who shows back up, that could go two completely different ways. I think if Rickon shows back up, we know he's he was already a wild child before. I can't imagine him toning it down or becoming more scholarly in his time on Skagos. So in that case, it could be more of a, well, I'm the king, all this little boy's assertion. It could be, more about the bannermen behind him saying, yeah, thanks for the help, but bye, see ya. We still want a king in the North. We have one now. Whereas Sansa, I think, there's more likelihood that she might initially try to get along with Stannis. She tries to lead with kindness and love, but of course, we've got Littlefinger in the background who certainly wouldn't want her aligning with anyone but him, and, trouble could be caused there. Not even to mention that I think that after Sansa spends any time with Stannis, they're not going to get along. I mean, he's not the most feminist of leaders in Westeros. I think he's more rigid. They just don't seem like characters that I think would find a lot of common ground. So yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with that. I love this point you've made.
Well, that'd be very, very interesting, in fact, if, let's say it is Sansa who comes up. Because, Stannis' whole deal is that he follows the letter of the law. So if Sansa appears and they still think Bran and Rickon have died, no one brings Rickon up, and especially if they hear about Jon, again, the timing is very different, but if Stannis thinks that possibility is now extinguished, and he knows that Sansa is the heir to Winterfell, then he will give it up to her because, like I say, he does what's right, but he'll be annoyed about that because, as you say, he's not going to think that a woman, a young woman as well, can hold Winterfell in these of all times. He's going to want a Castellan or someone looking after her. He's definitely not going to want that to be Peter Baelish if he's still around by this point. So he's going to try and probably impose his will on Sansa or push her this way or that way, if he even sticks around that long. I mean, the North might just be like, get the hell out of here by now. If they all, and they'll have the numbers if they all turn on him. It's very, very complicated. There's lots of intricacies to consider here, but definitely we could see that overall. So yeah, that sparks an interesting idea you bring up there.
I can't imagine that Stannis will be excited to see Baelish.
They do not.
They clearly already hated each other, yeah, it kind of depends on who has the greater strength, how that goes, because I think if Stannis is in his full power, he'll be like, get this Joker out of here. He's aligned with Cersei, how that'll actually shake out. I got to imagine if Littlefinger's going to make that move, he's prepared for a reaction like that from Stannis. For all the negative things we can say about Baelish, he is an over-prepared, overly cautious, cunning person. And so I can't imagine that he'd just walk into Stannis's knife,
The other choice I could have for someone going down early, and I take no joy in this answer because I quite like one of its members, Garland, just to give you a hint, is House Tyrell. I've already mentioned earlier on, I can't really see how the trials will go. I think Marjorie's going to get out of it okay, but then Cersei will take her revenge at some point. She's going to have to take someone out before Aegon comes to crash the party. Maybe that's Marjorie, maybe it's killing her, maybe it's not, maybe it's just removing her from her queenly status. Mace is probably going to meet his end at Storm's End's Siege version 3. I remain highly suspicious of Randall Tarley being a friend in the Reach, and even if he's not, then someone is. So I can see them turning on Tyrells. I can see the Tyrells finding themselves with many less friends than they originally thought, especially if Euron defeats Paxter Redwine's fleet and that kind of thing. Garland, we know, is going off to fight the Ironborn. He could run into trouble. Hopefully he doesn't die, because I quite like Garland. But even if he survives and the other Tyrells have to leave King's Landing, maybe they hole up at Highgarden or Brightwater Keep. But I could just see it being the end of their time in King's Landing and their position in the Great Game being like essentially destroyed. They're knocked down a few pegs. Loras would be an interesting part of that, because it might be he's already dead, so he just plays a part in therefore of the house in that area. But let's imagine if he's not, and he was faking all along as some sort of secret plan or another, and then he returns to find his family gone or arrested or whatever. That's going to be quite a shock for him.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, the idea that he's already dead and that's not out yet draws an interesting parallel to Renly, where, in the Battle of the Blackwater, they don Renly's armor and, pretend he's still in it. And will we see something similar, or is this going to parallel that at all? So I love that.
I mean, even if none of this does happen, you still got to figure when Aegon comes along, it's probably not going to bode too well for them. Maybe they can cut a deal, maybe they don't. I mean, they're definitely not going to be as in a good a position as they were with Cersei. And like we spoke about earlier, this isn't even talking about the accusations of murder and what Varys is going to get up to. There's lots of things going on, but I could definitely see them falling out of favour pretty quickly. And just to add on one more answer here at the end, Tommen, for example, if we really do need a king to die early on, it could be Tommen. The Sand Snakes are coming. It could go pretty quickly in the book, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a great pick. And I think especially when we've got Dorne coming into the mix, they hold Myrcella. Obviously the Queenmaker plot failed, but certainly wouldn't be a bad card for Dorne to be holding, to say, okay, Cersei, like, we have your only remaining child. You better play nice. Or just bringing her kind of back into relevance again through the death of Tommen could be quite interesting.
Okay, do you want to move us on to question 17, Emily?
You know that I would. This is actually my question.
Hey.
I want to know, and I think you already have no one's going to be surprised by your answer, but will Sweetrobin survive winds? And if not, why not?
Yeah, lots of Vale talk today. I find that we're getting quite a lot of Vale questions in general, considering that we've only had that one chapter and it's like a small part of the plot really. Everyone's just desperate to see more Sands, I think. But as to our question, ultimately, no. Unfortunately, I don't see Sweetrobin surviving. But I do find that pretty unfortunate. I would, for my personal use, I'd like him to continue on as long as possible, because we see in that Elaine preview chapter, he is growing into a bit of a fawn. Like he just knows things he shouldn't really be able to know. He's annoying Peter Baelish's plans a little bit more than he should be in his condition. It'd just be cool to see this essential human puddle actually provide some resistance and not go as easy as you'd think he would. But no, in the end, I don't think it really makes sense for him to survive. If Sansa's suspected plot with Harry is to go the way we think it will, I think he's gonna have to go, isn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think, given what we talked about in the last question about potential attorney deaths, it could be pretty interesting pivot if we do see Harry struck down early. How does that change the plans that Littlefinger and Sansa have? If all of a sudden there is no heir and they're stuck with Sweetrobin, what does that mean? And have they already gone too far and basically slowly poisoning him with sweet sleep? And, can they come back from that if all of a sudden they do need an Aaron who's pliable and, needing to be around a bit longer? I think ultimately it's going to have to be either Littlefinger or Sweetrobin going down. I don't see them both making it through the book. Littlefinger has a considerable advantage here. He's an adult, he's healthy, he's intelligent, he's got basically everything going for him. Even if Sansa gets cold feet about the plan or starts to realize the seriousness of what she's, been involved in and kind of been doing to him, I don't think she's progressed far enough from pawn to player just yet to be able to successfully block Littlefinger if he does want to make a move. So even if she says, hey, I see what you're doing, I don't think I'm cool with this, I don't think that that'll be enough to stop him if he wants Sweetrobin gone. That could obviously change in wins, but I tend to agree that Sweetrobin is probably not long for the world.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a sad day when it finally does come. I know he's ultra annoying and grinding, especially early on in Game of Thrones. I know he's written to be that way, but consider what he's actually been through of late, or not even of late, but before Game of Thrones, during Game of Thrones, and then especially from Storm onwards. He's been dealt the worst possible hand. He's had all this tragedy. He's being completely manipulated. He's being abused, first off, with, like you say, with the sweet sleep. And it's Peter fucking Baelish orchestrating all that. So it would be a true tragedy to see him go after all that hardship and to give Baelish another win. That's not something I want to see. It's interesting, actually, though. We just brought up Rickon. It'd be weird parallel if we lose one young, unpliable kid and then Rickon comes back in. And although, yes, he's very, very different in nature to Sweetrobin, he could be the same fawn annoyance in terms of not just, like you say, being too wild and not controllable and wind everyone up. So it'd be interesting if we lose one to get the other back.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And, noting the point that you made about how he's annoying or grinding, I think you and I actually got into it recently with a few folks in the fandom about this who aren't big Sweetrobin fans, because ultimately he's a young child. And, there are a lot of obnoxious, bratty young children out there. But I think ultimately, that's something that I don't like to hold against kids until they've matured and seen if they can grow out of it. I mean, just like a lot of the Sansa hate that comes in early because of the mistakes she's making. He's a young boy. He is, like you said, dealt a really difficult hand in his life. His mom really fucked him up. We've got Peter fucking Baelish coming in as act 2 of that. I think I feel bad for this kid. It's going to be tragic if he goes down, even if I certainly wouldn't want to be his babysitter.
Yeah, exactly right. You can see why he's annoying and it's difficult to read sometimes, but I challenge anyone to be dealt that same hand that he has and not turn out that exact same way, because that is just what would happen. It's completely realistic how George has written that.
Certainly.
Okay, let's move on to question 18, heading towards the last leg here. This one is from another good friend, is Micah, who's sent in quite a few good questions actually. This one for this week is this. What possible events happening at the end of Dance or during Winds do you think that Bran could see through the weirwood net in The Winds of Winter, such as possibly the death of Roose Bolton, which is Micah's own suggestion? Another big question here.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Micah. You always send really meaty questions, and I love it. I'm going to start us off here with a rundown of some known weirwood locations. I think that that's probably the most likely view that we'll get through things. I don't know if it's like the show where all of a sudden Bran can just see and do anything in time and history, or if it's going to be a little bit more pared down, especially now. I could see his powers growing, but for now, I think he's going to need a weirwood or an animal or something to kind of be that his eyes, basically.
Yeah.
So, rundown of weirwood locations. Obviously, here on the Isle, we have to start with the Isle of Faces. I know earlier you said you didn't necessarily want to see it. I think if we do see it, the way I would want to see it is a glimpse through Bran. I want a little bit of that mystery kept alive, but certainly some interesting things in history have probably gone down on the Isle, and maybe we'll get a little bit of a glimpse. Who knows? We've got the Heart Tree at Winterfell. This is, I think what Micah was referencing in his question, so I want to give it some weight here. That's currently where Roose Bolton is. Obviously, there was a lot going on in the show with important characters, battles, etc., all going down in the Godswood. So I think that, even if we don't want to take too much of the show into account here, that there's certainly a good chance, and that is definitely going to be the weirwood tree that Bran has the most personal connection with. And so it makes sense that that'd be somewhere he spends a lot of time. We already kind of have seen it a little bit in terms of some of the things he's flashed back to at Winterfell.
We've also seen him kind of be there during dance, like he's whispered, or we assume it's Bran anyway. We don't know, but we're making the fairly solid assumption that it is Bran speaking to Theon through the weirwood. So he might have seen the wedding, he might have seen Theon after, and we're not sure how much he's seen. Maybe he literally gets flashes, but if he sees enough to see that the Boltons are in control or that Winterfell is being attacked in battle, that might be one of the catalysts that like wakes him up and he's like, no, I actually need to go back to the living world, or I need to try and affect it more, because he thinks Winterfell's dead and gone and empty, obviously, from when he left it. If he sees that things are going on in the north and in his home, that might be one of the things that actually kind of jars him awake and makes him a bit more active. So that's definitely a good suggestion for Micah.
Yeah. Next on my list here is Casterly Rock. Casterly Rock lists high up on the places of people are kind of hoping to see in the next book. We think it's coming. Up until now, there have been no major events in the current timeline of A Song of Ice and Fire that I think are worth showing there. I think all the Lannisters have been kind of spread out either in King's Landing or at war, so there's not a ton immediately that we would need to see, but that could change if any prominent characters go there. We're probably likely to see it through their eyes, since we have a lot of all three of Tywin's kids have a POV chapter. But if we see the Ironborn or Aegon or Daenerys show up there instead, could we get a glimpse of that through Bran? I don't know. You just talked about the Tyrells, so let's move on to Highgarden. Lots of turmoil in the Stormlands and potentially the Reach and Winds. Bran seeing something at Highgarden could provide an angle into the conflict there without having to maneuver a POV specifically to that castle. So it's a nice option to have from a storytelling perspective. Riverrun has its own Godswood as well. The Riverlands have been absolutely ravaged, and Riverrun is currently under the control of Lord Aemon Frey. With the Brotherhood still in the Riverlands and so much still raging on in the War of the I don't even know how many kings and queens now, we could definitely get a window into someone, retaking that from the Freys. I find it really entertaining to watch, the Bran kind of watching the pathetic Lord Frey sent packing. So who knows? Yeah,
that's a good pick, that one. That would be, because he might just be curious and be like, oh, I guess I could look at where my mother comes from, what's going on there, and things like that. And then, massive battle. Maybe he even, this is touching a little bit on a later question, but maybe he even catches a glimpse of Stoneheart, and again, something awakens inside him and he's like, oh, hang on, wait a minute, and all these kind of things.
Yeah. We've got another Riverlands location that I don't have a ton of ideas for would be Harrenhal. We also know that there's a heart tree at White Harbor. Bran, maybe flashing back and witnessing some of the planning of the Manderleys and kind of giving a little bit more backstory into some of the theories that are out there about what they're up to. Could be pretty interesting. We've got Hollow Hill in the Riverlands where we met the Ghost of Highheart. We've had a couple of characters traipsing through the Riverlands see it or spend a little time there. Actually, the ruins of the Whispers, which is the resting place of Nimble Dick, has a heart tree. I don't, see any need to go there, but just worth noting. There is a Weirwood Grove, of course, north of Castle Black, where Jon took his vows. There's White Tree as well. There's plenty of activity north of the Wall. So I think, if we need a view into the large-scale movement of the others and what's going on up there, there's options as well. And then I also just really briefly want to touch on some of the rumored or possible additional locations where we don't have necessarily deep confirmation, but that there certainly could be a Weirwood Tree, which would be Skagos, Derry, Deepwood Mott, Raventree Hall. We know the tree there is actually dead, but we don't know if that means that you can't look through it anymore. Make some assumptions, but, and then beyond the trees itself, Bran could also use his warging powers. We discussed last time how he's continually tempted to use them to control Hodor to get close to Mira, but he's got plenty of other uses for them as well. Summer, any of the other direwolves we know about. I think people are really hyped or interested in the idea that maybe he could warg into a dragon and see through their eyes. And, of course, we've got ravens or birds or, any animal that he might be aware of or tied to in some way that he could see through as well. And that opens up a whole lot more possibilities of what could be seen.
Yeah, I think the ravens, the birds, that's probably the one where we're getting close to, because then Theon's preview chapter, which I know we've had to delay, but I've already been through it. So in that one, I actually forgot before rereading it, but at the end, the ravens are actually saying Theon's name out loud. So they're obviously, I mean, it might not be Bran, it could be Bloodraven, but you think it's probably Bran. They're probably being used by him as again, cameras, or even microphones in this case. So I think in that case, probably one of the options we're probably more certain of, if we had to put money on it, would be Bran witnessing Theon's death. Again, from that preview chapter, Asher is asking Stannis to execute Theon in front of the heart tree instead of burning him. That would wrap into a lot of Theon's themes and stuff like that, and he's actually covered the prospect of that himself as well, both in that preview chapter and at the end of that, so that would make sense. In terms of other things he could look through as well, I've long wondered if Bran ever learns to look through disconnected pieces of weirwood, like weirwood that's been used for something else, like it's part of the moon door, I think, and someone's got like a staff made of it.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not, because you'd think they're not connected to the weirwood net, as people call it, but if he did, that would open up the door, obviously, to see basically anything. Because like you, I don't think it goes like the show where he can just tap into it wherever he likes. I think he needs like a tether somewhere, but maybe not, who knows.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, this isn't some high fantasy novel where everyone's just like, dripping with ambient magic. So I do agree that at least in Winds, I think where he's still coming into his full power, he's not going to just be able to teleport his consciousness to anywhere in the known world. I think we need that tether. Now, how creative we can get with that tether, we'll find out.
Yeah,
but
true.
Yeah. Great question from Micah. I love it. I'm so excited to see where this goes.
Well, I've got one more ans here, which might have even been the inspiration for this question. Maybe not. Maybe I'm being a bit cocky. But I once suggested on Twitter, and I know Micah reacted to it, that maybe Bran is inside the weirwood that Shireen is tied to when she is inevitably burned, and therefore he's present and really like feels her death, feels the burning of it. Just to take it really, really super dark here for a moment. That was met by some reactions, if I remember correctly, on Twitter. Like I said, I think Micah might have been one of them. So I'm going to stick with that answer, just to really freak everyone out a bit.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps to think about. I know it's coming. We know it's coming, but I just like have this mental block on it. I don't like to sit around and think of the sweet innocent children of the series dying. So
no, we won't go any further into that. But I've planted the image in everyone's mind.
Yeah. Sleep well tonight, folks.
I'll take a quick switch to the next question, shall I?
Yeah. Let's move along.
Yeah, we'll go right along. We won't linger on that too much.
So we spent a lot of time in Westeros this episode, so let's move to a Daenerys question. This comes from Brian Fisher, who's Kajani B on Twitter. Hope I said that right. The question is, could Daenerys use the Dragonbinder horn and not burn up due to her innate heat tolerance from being a Targaryen? We saw this in the funeral pyre, etc. So what do you think?
Well, firstly, I'm glad we said heat tolerance instead of just like fire resistance, because that used to be an idea that I think most people have left by the wayside. She's not just completely fire resistant. I guess it really depends on whether you think the horn is purely like a fire weapon or is it a dark magic weapon. I lean towards the latter. There's something more than just, it doesn't just heat up a person, like there's something more to it. It's blood magic, is something unknown to us. So I don't think it just requires that heat tolerance of the Targaryens to protect against it. Personally, I don't think she'll require it in the first place, but maybe she does. I mean, there's lots of theories we could go down about her losing one or more of her dragons. Maybe she needs the horn to get them back. I like to think there's other avenues for her to take, or I like to think that she wouldn't need them herself. Anyway, I definitely don't like the idea that she needs them just to control them, because that would take quite a lot away from like her final dance chapter where she's learning without horns and other spells and stuff like that with Drogon. I wouldn't want that kind of corrupted by, oh, here's a horn, by the way. And no, I don't really want that. I quite like her taking the tough route. But let's say she does require it. Well, she doesn't have to blow it herself, remember, as we already know from talking about Euron and Victarion and the others who've blown it. That's not how it works. She just needs someone who she has their heart type thing. So actually, I think Jorah Mormont would be a better candidate. Maybe that's how he makes up for everything that he's done, is I'll risk it. I'll blow the horn for you to get your dragon back. She definitely does own his heart. We know that. And he would like to make things up for her. He'd probably like to live and do that, but maybe not.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I agree with you that I don't think that Daenerys needs the horn unless somehow one of her dragons is stolen or she's desperate. If that's the case, I don't necessarily see that whole thing going down in Winds specifically. To kind of turn it on its head, and because we think, she's likely to reclaim all three of her dragons before coming west. I'm curious about another Targaryen getting a hold of the horn. We know that Jon and Aegon are not necessarily immediately poised with access to the horn, especially Jon. And we've seen evidence that Jon has been affected by fire before with his burned hand, but as both you and Brian have pointed out here, burning isn't the same thing as heat resistance. In the books, Daenerys' hair is burned off in the funeral pyre. Yeah. She really should have much shorter hair in at least Clash. Either way, I think, Aegon is certainly closer to Euron right now, actually alive, unlike Jon, and therefore a more likely candidate if we're talking about Targaryens who might get the corn, or who might get the horn. Could his attempted use of it prove definitively his Targaryen bloodline? It might even be a further cloaking of his potential Blackfire identity if he does find a way to use it safely. Certainly, Blackfires have Targaryen blood, even if it's not legitimate, but that could be a great way to prove, look, I'm a genuine Targ. You think I'm some swapped out baby? Well, I'll blow this horn and prove to you I'm not. And then what happens next could be very interesting. Yeah, I mean, could this be Aegon's way of securing one of the dragons? Is he one of the heads of the dragon? And, I don't think Daenerys is necessarily poised to want to give him one. Tyrion made some great points about why she wouldn't be immediately excited to have him on her side. So I have a hard time thinking she'll just hand one over.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely going to be a case of taking dragons more than receiving dragons, especially in Aegon's case. I can't see that happening. Yeah, good candidates all around there. Just one more actually to add on the Jorah Mormont idea. I mean, he has already been branded, so that kind of fits in there. And then we could call him the Burnt Bear from then on. If he does blow the horn and gets burnt up, that can be his nickname. And good riddance.
All right, are you ready for our last question for today?
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's go with question 20 then. This is sent in from the Hedge Knight, another of our esteemed friends from the Radio Westeros Discord, a fellow mod of ours. It is, how do you see the Lady Stoneheart story panning out? And might Arya play a part in her demise? The Hedge Knight is convinced that she will. Big question to finish off.
Sure. Well, I think you mentioned early on that this is definitely something that we're having a hard time predicting in terms of the immediate outcome of Stoneheart and the trial. But I think you and I are probably in agreement that we expect Lady Stoneheart to make it out of that whole tussle. Whether the rest of them do, we don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, the idea that Arya is going to have some part in her demise is certainly a popular theory. So some points to make there. I love the idea recently she's taken up the moniker of Mercy. Meanwhile, we know that Lady Stoneheart is sometimes called Mother Merciless. So that's an interesting comparison there. And I think it ties them together in ways that, we've seen her take Cat over Catelyn, but now, she's shifted into Mother Merciless and we have Mercy. So I just love that clever wording from George. I don't see Stoneheart being cut down sooner than Arya's return to Westeros. She's in a position of power right now. We're expecting Jaime and Brienne to come before her early in Winds, probably for some kind of trial, as you said. While there is some thematic possibility for Brienne and or Jaime to be her downfall, particularly given the theme of vows for all of those characters and the vows that they spoke to Catelyn during her life being the chief focus of the trial, one or both of them ending her undead crusade could fit. However, Lady Stoneheart has a ton of backing from the Brotherhood, particularly some fearsome characters like Lem or some cunning characters. I also think that the risk to Podrick, is something that Brienne would certainly be taking into account when thinking about doing something reckless here. Arya obviously has some travel to do, but I think we're all expecting her to eventually break from the House of Black and White, either through a graduation, a mission, or, she might just get kicked out right away for what she did in the Mercy chapter. I don't know how quickly they're going to tie that back to her. She's certainly working her way, towards becoming Arya Stark of Winterfell again.
Yeah, or she might start hearing rumours. I mean, we think that she might meet Jane Poole. If she hears about Jon, perhaps, then she might just break off mid-mission and go missing, go AWOL, or anything like that, really. So I could do multiple hours on this topic. I'll try and keep it short. I'll try and keep it to a summary because we're at the end here. But to be honest, my answer doesn't differ too much from yours. I have discussed this probably ad nauseum so many times before on Scraps and Scrolls, basically at any chance I get, because Catelyn is my favourite.
Well, we love hearing it.
Well, I was even lucky enough to go on a Radio Westeros live stream last year to talk about Stoneheart. So I'll give the overview, which, like I say, is difficult because Catelyn is my favourite character. And if someone told me that I could only ever read one plotline from Winds and no others, I would probably choose Stonehearts, if I'm being honest with you. I do see Arya returning to interact with her mother, like you and the Hedge Knight have guessed, quite possibly in the giving of that ultimate mercy. I think that's fairly clearly telegraphed from what we've seen and the naming conventions and all that kind of stuff. I've gone on and on and on in the past about the need for there to be a moment of, at least a moment, maybe more moments of connection between the two, between mother and daughter, because they weren't as close as they should have been back in their home life. And I think that's a massive, massive regret for both of them after they leave, and obviously the opportunity for that dies. Sansa was more Catelyn's girl, whereas Arya was closer to Ned. She was veering much more into the Stark lineage. She was more like Lyanna. She was closer to Jon, all those kind of things. But then, since the family has actually broken, Ned fell and everything else, they've had more than enough connection thematically. Arya was trying to get to Riverrun that whole time. We thought maybe she would get back to Catelyn. Arya was the guardian or the justicar of the Riverlands. She was the one out on the field seeing all the crimes. She was the one that paid some of it back. She honoured her Tully blood. We concentrated on that a lot when she killed the Tickler at the inn, and obviously she was outrageously close to actually getting back to Catelyn at the Twins just before her mother's death. So I absolutely see them reuniting, and I personally would like to see it at Riverrun as well. I think that's another important part for both characters. I think Arya's Riverland story is unfinished. She spent so long trying to get there, she never quite managed it, so I'd like to see that finally fulfilled. As for Catelyn, Riverrun it's her Winterfell. It's where her soul resides. She wants to avenge it. She wants to get it out of Frey hands. We spoke about that very quickly earlier on. And just to throw some other ideas in there, like I say, I could just go on about what I've said already. I'm saying this is the short version. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it really, really is. But to throw some other ideas in there quickly, I still maintain that it'd be cool to see Sansa go to Riverrun as well. The idea of both daughters following in their mother's footsteps, around the Riverlands for Arya, around the Vale for Sansa, that could come to a head with the ultimate reunion in Riverrun. Imagine all three of them being back together, and they would believe their female half to be all that's left of House Stark, especially if news of Jon has come south. So that would be the most amazing parting gift you could give to Stoneheart, to see her daughters together again. And it's most likely a pipe dream, I'm aware of that, but it's a damn cool pipe dream, I say.
That's all right. I mean, I actually have an idea for how Sansa could get there, which would be for the Mad Mouse to, be successful, actually. Get her heading out of the Vale and back through the Riverlands. Wouldn't surprise me if he was, somewhat successful at first, but then, ran smack into someone from the Brotherhood. I think that could be pretty interesting. And like you said, for both of them to be in front of their mother one more time, especially, harkening back to the topic we had of vows, that could, should Jaime get away or prove his innocence in trial, this could be kind of that final snippet of evidence of like, look, your daughters have returned to you. Maybe I didn't personally bring it all about, but in a way, here they are. Or, if something goes wrong for Brienne or Jaime in that trial, and then Sansa and Arya, or just Arya, who knows, show back up in front of their mother, that could be, justification or kind of the ultimate, last nail in the coffin for Stoneheart in terms of, look what you've done in the name of vengeance. You slaughtered so many, and yet here they are. Here are your daughters doing just fine. Maybe we don't need your vengeance anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of avenues it could take. There's a lot of lessons to be learned, especially on those themes of vengeance, and obviously it not being the best of ideas. That's very much centered around Feast and Arya's storyline as well in general. I think there are routes that Sansa could get. There's many different routes that Sansa could take to the Riverlands. She could be going there with Baelish. I mean, if the North, we know that's not his initial plan, but that doesn't mean that can't be blocked off. He's got to change, or he is the ruler of the Riverlands technically still. Maybe he wants to pop in, see how it's going. Because I'd quite like that as well. If Peter Baelish actually got to look literally in the ravaged face of all that he's created, and the one person that it was all supposed to be for, and maybe she kills him, well, I would tip my cap to that. That would finish me off, I think. But there's also there's room for so much more as well. There's room for Stoneheart to head north, especially if she hears, let's say before Arya or Sansa return, if she hears that Arya is getting married up in the hands of the Boltons at Winterfell, well, I mean, she needs to go up there anyway, didn't she? She knows that Bolton betrayed and literally killed Robb. It was him that did it. So she needs to visit vengeance upon him as well. That could be something on her to-do list. We've already seen her kind of dip in and out of the neck a bit. Oh, there's rumours about that. So she might already be thinking that way. But other than the girls, the interaction I would most like to see is Catelyn reuniting with her beloved uncle Brynden, the Blackfish Tully, who's one of my favourites. Again, I've gone on about this multiple times. It seems almost simple to say it at this point, but yeah, fuck yes, I would like to see the Blackfish join up with the Brotherhood and wage this war of vengeance upon the Freys and take the Riverlands and take Riverrun back. I really want to see him initially meet his beloved niece again, and how that works, how he's able to, if he's able to accept it or get that through his mind at all. I want to see his terrain-based tactics blend seamlessly with the Brotherhood. I've mentioned before about the corruption of the Brotherhood. I want to see the resolution of that and how far that goes. Also, how they're going to react to winter, because it will severely hamper how the Brotherhood operates. Will Stoneheart have to take a base? Will it be Riverrun? There's 1,000 different questions. I could go on and on and on, but I want all of those good things. The good part of seeing her again, like I say, I have expanded on countless times. I would really like to see all of those.
Yeah. You absolutely gave me chills at the idea of Blackfish joining the Brotherhood. I think that could be such an interesting exploration of knighthood and honor again. You know, we generally think of the Blackfish as someone who's very, very stubborn in his ideals. And, you know, while he's good at guerrilla tactics and while he has a lot, you know, of reason to want to go after the Freys, is he going to be comfortable with the extent and the lengths at which the Brotherhood is willing to take? And could there be conflict there? We certainly are leaning towards it being Arya who takes him out, but I have to imagine that if I saw my niece, who I love very much, turned into a vengeance-filled zombie, you know, traipsing across the land with company like some of the Brotherhood, I don't know if I would be okay with that.
Yeah, quite possible. Again, very, very hard to predict, but definitely the one I'm most interested in. That Bryn stuff, I mean, I've been thinking about that for so long. It's one of those ones that I almost fall into the trap of being like, almost doing it as fact. Like, well, yeah, that is going to happen. So I probably need to rein it back in and think about it more, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, gosh, what a great question to end things on. Thank you to the Hedge Knight for this one. As we said, we really could have done a whole episode on this, and, you know, maybe someday, who knows?
Yeah. I have before, do it again.
Right. Well, as just a little reminder to everybody, you know, we're still looking for more questions. Please tweet at us. Please email us. You know, join our Patreon campaign where you can get a lot more direct access to us and some of the you know, fun things. And for all our patrons, we certainly will be addressing all of your questions. So please keep them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget your answers as well. In fact, let's give a very, very quick basic rundown of the questions we've tackled today, 11 through 20. We asked, what locations that we've never been to are we looking forward to seeing in Winds? We said, who is the next Nimble Dick or the fan favourite? Which storyline or character we find most difficult to predict? What Tywin was doing in Lys all those years ago. Will any new Valyrian steel swords, especially make up your own? Tell us about the houses you think deserve one or maybe have one, and give us your names.
We've got, you know, who is the most disappointing storyline in Winds, or the one to get an early exit? We, you know, want to know your thoughts on whether Sweetrobin will survive or not. Which potential events happening at the end of Dance or through Winds that Bran could see through the weirwood net. We asked about Dany and the Dragonbinder horn, as well as, you know, potential other candidates for using that horn safely or not in the future. And this last question here about where we see the Lady Stoneheart storyline going.
Absolutely. So plenty for you to think about, plenty for you to let us know about. And again, maybe we'll get to feature some of those answers. Either way, we thank you for joining us here on the Art Again and listening in, as well as everything else you do. whether it's liking a tweet or sharing it or being a wonderful, wonderful patron. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We will be back soon. We're doing a pretty good job of keeping this regular.
Yeah.
By the time you listen to this, the Sporkle Spectacular will be out, so you can listen to that. Ariane 2 will probably be, if not out, then pretty soon, and Scraps and Scrolls will keep going as well. So I'll say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye, and thank you again.
And we'll hopefully see everybody next time. Thank you, one and all.